This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Abby Lucas.
We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of creativity.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
On each episode, we examine the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
We aren't. Find us online at artofdarkpod.com, and please support the show through Patreon or Substack. You get extra stuff. Thank you. And we are back with another core episode of Art of Darkness, the podcast about the dark side of creativity. I am Kevin Kautzman, joined by the singular Abby Lucas. Abby, how are things in the old country? How are things in London?
Things in London, London has decided that summer is not fully cooked yet.
I see. Yes. The same thing is happening here in Minnesota, but we can hunker down, hide inside Art of Darkness Studio East, Art of Darkness Studio West. I guess I'm Studio West, yeah. And we can deliver a core episode to the people. And I'm very excited. I'm very glad to have you along for this, Abby. I promise I will not define my politics or my aesthetics based on puns like Pablo-matic. I'm not going to say Pablo-matic on this show except to sneer at the word Pablo-matic. I'm not going to say
I've never actually heard the word problematic until today.
So you know what? I might edit this out, right? Because of course,
okay.
And we're not going to talk about Pablo ticks. We're not going to talk about. We're gonna leave the puns to the Philistines, and we're actually going to try to. Although I love a good pun, and so that pains me a great deal. I think everybody should know this. So of course, we're covering the life of the turbulent genius Pablo Picasso. And let's kick it off. Abby, what do you know about Picasso?
I know that he was probably the most important artist of the 20th century, that he invented cubism and collage and probably all of modern art. I know that he is Spanish. I know that he lived in Paris, and he popped up in the Chanel episode a few times, having done scenic design for some theaters over there. I know a little bit about the Guernica painting, which is, quite significant. And I also understand that he was a bit of a narcissist would be an understatement, and probably I'm not going to like him very much.
Well, you might like the work, Abby. And
I mean, I do like the work. I already am an appreciator of the work, but
right. Yeah, he is. As you say, most of that was accurate. Cubism, which we will cover pretty exhaustively, in the three phases of Cubism and all of this, which I never understood, and I still don't really understand, but I'll do my best to sort of convey what it is in this episode. He co-invented that with George Braque, who was French, and we will go into all of that. They were a partnership, much like you and
cool.
me. Yeah, they could have had these guys. They could have had a podcast. But Picasso's genius was singular, and there are not many artists who you can say confidently what you just said. Leaving the bastard qualities aside, leaving the philandering aside, the near, the sort of age gap problem, which would repeat, the wreckage that he would leave, which we're gonna talk about. He, by some estimates, produced 40,000. You've seen 50,000 pieces of work across media. He transformed painting. He transformed ceramics and sculpture and other forms in a way that I only am just beginning to understand and appreciate. And again, I would challenge people to find 3, 5 more people from the 20th century that you would say, aha, that's the fellow who or the lady who did the most, who was the
Mm.
most impactful. And we're gonna talk about all of it on this core episode. Just a little housekeeping before we dig into it. You know what it is. This show is Art of Darkness. You can find us at artofdarkpod.com. We have a Discord. The link is at that website. We love hearing from people as long as it's civil and you have something constructive to say. Artofdarkpod at gmail.com. We're, we're always looking for guests for our dark rooms. Those are
Hmm.
pretty low lift episodes. It's 60 minutes on main and then about 30 minutes for the after dark for patrons. And if you have something to promote, you're an artist yourself, you want to talk about one of our subjects, we do love hearing from people. As long as you're not promoting something that's like totally afield from arts and culture, right? So if you are a possible guest for Art of Darkness. What else? I will tease the After Dark. I've got a lot of cool stuff
Mm.
on the After Dark. Um, why don't I tease it right now? So, if you're new to the pod or you've just found this because you're searching Picasso, we do bonus content for every episode, and we call that After Dark. And that is behind the paywall at Patreon and Substack, patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod or substack.com/at Art of Dark Pod. Easy to find. They mirror one another. So, whether you go with one or the other, it's the same. And for this After Dark, and yeah, these are a little cheeky and kind of out of order, but I think it's fun. It gives you a little teaser too for what's coming in the core episode here, right? It is our year of Lynch, so we are
Hmm.
reading randomly from Catching the Big Fish. We've already had some fun synchronicities on the Chanel episode. I think it might have been the first time we read from Catching the Big
Mm.
Fish. I opened it, and this is in the After Dark. After you did many hours on Coco Chanel, and the first line I opened to randomly in Catching the Big Fish was, "I love the French." I mean, how more there could not have been more perfect. So we'll see if there's any synergy here. We are going to look at his cruelty to his own son and grandson
Mhm.
as revealed by his granddaughter, Marina Picasso. She wrote actually, frankly, harrowing tell-all memoir about living in the shadow of Picasso, and she does not paint him in a friendly light whatsoever. Another
Mm.
relative wrote a book, I think, somewhat countering this, and this is Olivier Widmeyer Picasso, and this book helpfully comes with a little bookmark of the family tree because there were multiple women.
Oh,
Yeah, and so this fellow, I'll get into it as we go. But anyway, this book is much more favorable to Pablo, and I think is kind of trying to paint a more complete picture of the man. So tricky stuff, a lot of bitterness, a lot of rage, and but we'll talk about the Marina memoir on the After Dark. Um, we're also going to talk about the time he was accused of stealing the Mona Lisa. Did you know about
oh
this?
wow.
Super fun. That's going to be
And
really fun.
now that you've mentioned it, I think I vaguely recall something.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure I had ever heard of that, so that's going to be really fun. We have to remember too with Picasso, he was a Spanish national. He
Mm.
never took French citizenship, and so in for great stretches of time, he was kind of a man without a state when Franco took over
Hmm.
Spain. So we'll talk about his life intersected with the great events of the 20th century, the mid, sort of the beginning, the first half of that century in a really direct ways. Everybody knows Guernica, and so we'll get to all of that. And then we are going to look at the tragic fates of some of the women who loved him. And here's a fun quote. Yeah, he would destroy women. Uh, Here's what he said. There are only two kinds of women, goddesses and doormats. All right. So buckle up for probably the most misogynistic Art of Darkness episode of all time.
Well, you've
Yeah.
gotta steal some life forces from somewhere to make 40,000 works of art.
Yeah, this man was probably, and I don't want to poison the well here, right? He was a genius from jump, and we're going to talk about that. He puts the lie to the idea that modern art is only created by people who couldn't do the sort of
Mm.
photorealistic classical art. He was doing that when he was 14 or 15. He was winning prizes. He was so good so early that his hack father, who was a painter, an academic painter, quit and said, if my son is already doing that, it's hopeless for me.
Right.
It might be apocryphal, but they say his father gave him his paints. But he grew up in a household like that, and they say that I'm going a little out of order here, but they say that he could draw before he could speak, and that kind of household.
Hmm.
So just a real savant, not naive at all. Did not emerge out of nowhere, a painter from jump or an artist from jump. All right, and we will finally on the After Dark talk about his morbid fear of death. Now, consider this: you've heard some of the, you know, sort of dueling memoirs or biographies from the grandchildren. Picasso had a lot of money. He was extraordinarily
Mm.
wealthy and quickly, and he went from real hand to mouth poverty and the gutter, near the gutter, painting the gutter, um, to like a world we might recognize, Abby, to to being legitimately like wealthy and ultimately probably the most famous artist in the world to the point where he could not go out in France in one lifetime.
Mm.
Obviously, and just really fascinating. And but he had a terrible fear of death, so much so that he did not leave a will for this magnificent estate, which you might imagine caused some problems.
Yeah.
Some that
Were
was
these
mhm.
were these dueling biographies written in his lifetime?
No, I believe it was after he expired. I believe it
Okay.
actually. You know what? I take that back. I have to look again. We will get to it. The one about from Marina may have been published in his lifetime. I will have to look. But the other one certainly was not. And
Uh,
I'm pretty sure the Marina one wasn't. Although there was a biography
just
about, yeah.
asking out of pure cynicism.
Yeah. No, no, no. I think why the reason I got a little confused there is that because one of the other books, and this is good, I have to get into the books we're going to cover. I believe the famous or infamous book by Francois Gillot was published in his lifetime to his dismay. And she is the one
Oh,
woman, we will cover this. She is the one woman who got away and like got away on
okay.
her own terms with children. And she's a painter in her own right. And if you want to follow up and learn more about Picasso, she is a wonderful entrance into this, and there is a lot of good media interviewing her. And she lived until a few years ago. She was still alive. This
Mm.
connection to Picasso, and she was very self-possessed. She had her own money. She had family money. She didn't need him that way. So, in any event, she was the one who kind of got away, and we'll cover that. And pretty sure she published this while he was still alive, and he was horrified because he really valued his privacy. The other books I have are the Marina Picasso. We'll probably stick to the After Dark for that one. Then I have Picasso, The Real Family Story here by
Oh,
yeah, one of the grandchildren. And then I have Picasso by Patrick O'Brien, the big doorstopper of a
these
bio.
are big books.
They
Wow, you
are,
lived till like 90, right? So,
yeah. I mean, sure. And he made a lot of art, and he changed the world of art forever. All right. Once again, if you want to support the pod and get more content, go to patreon.com/art of dark pod. We've got some good stuff coming up and we appreciate it. And yeah, we appreciate all our current subscribers. Thank you all. All right.
thank you.
Yes. Ready to rock? All right. I'm
Hmm.
ready to rock. Now, this is going to be fun. Wish me luck here. There's a lot of Spanish, which I may be a little better at than French, and then there's a lot of French. So, whew, I we call this back in the the pulp and slick era, the Brad and Kevin era. We call this episode Big Air, Abby. This is Big Air. This is
Okay.
a giant of art. This is not some obscure person we're bringing to light. This is a global sensation, and so here we go. All right, no
Bonne
pressure.
chance.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Way. Pablo Picasso was born October 25th, 1881, in Malaga, Spain. And he had a crazy long name. I'm just going to open
Malaga.
a Malaga. There you go. Exactly. Thank you, Abby. Thank you. Listen, I'm a redneck in a turtleneck. I'm from the Midwest, and I do my best. Okay, Malaga. Here is his full name: Diego Jose Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno Maria de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Martyr Patricio Clito Ruiz y Picasso.
That is the most
Nailed it.
Spanish name ever.
I am feeling it. I feel good. That was way better than I expected it to be.
The
You
end.
are welcome. Yes. Holy moly. All right, and I'm going to read from
Well done.
I'm gonna thank you, thank you. I'm gonna start reading from the Patrick O'Brien, all right, and we'll jump around a bit, but I'm mostly trying to go chronologically. And the general shape of this episode is perhaps a bit of a cliche, but we are going to cover major works and we are going to cover the major women. Seems obvious
Mhm.
and important to do. All right. Picasso was born on October 25th, 1881, in Malaga, the first, the only son of Dona Maria Picasso y Lopez and her husband, Don Jose Ruiz y Blasco, a painter, a teacher in the city's art school, and the curator of a local museum. The statement is true. It is to be found in all the reference books, but perhaps it does not convey a great deal of information, except to those Spaniards who can easily visualize the Malaga of Alfonso XII's time as English-speaking readers can the St. Louis of President Arthur's or the Southampton of Queen Victoria's. To those who know the economic, cultural, and social position of a middle-class family in that town and that pattern of life in the 19th century, Andalusia as a whole, uh, for even the strongest individual is indelibly marked by the culture in which he is brought up. Even the loneliest man is not an island, and even Picasso carried his cradle with him to his grave. A man belongs to his own country forever. And a little bit about Malaga. Malaga, at that time, was an ancient city in the far south of Spain, an essentially Mediterranean city, and after Barcelona, the country's most important seaport on that coast. It had been a great port for centuries before Barcelona was heard of, having a natural harbor as opposed to Barcelona's open beach. All right, fair enough. So we're just setting the scene here. He
Mm.
would obviously have a life all around, but his Spanishness was critical to his identity and key to understanding his work, his fear of death, his attitude toward religion, his attitude toward politics. They would say that he was, because of course he was sort of like, he was a communist on paper. He kind of went along with all of that.
Mhm.
But privately, his attitude, they would say, was very Catholic, just fundamentally Catholic. Even if he wasn't attending Mass, that was what he was. So let's read a little bit more just about the household. Um, the household was poor, but with a poverty that did not exclude the presence of some agreeable things, such as a set of Chippendale chairs that had presumably reached Spain by way of Gibraltar and that eventually came down to Picasso, and some pleasant Italian pieces of furniture. Uh, and Aunt Joseph, at least, owned a gold watch and chain. Nor in the Spain of that time did poverty mean the absence of servants any more than it did in
Mm.
period in England. There is indeed something a little anyway, he's referring to Macabre, somebody I don't know, but any of it, that is a very fascinating thing. Like you can be poor, you still got the help. Wild.
Yeah.
Um, Don Jose, too, was a hopeless man of business. He, too, hoped for something to turn up. He, too, had a wife who never deserted him, although a flat in which the cooking had to be done over charcoal in little raised holes, the water and slops to be carried up and down some 50 stairs, and oil lamps to be cleaned, filled, and lighted every day must have been a trial to her constancy, servants or no servants. All right. So we have a little picture of the kind of poverty that pretty unrelatable to most people's experience now.
Mm.
Um,
And Malaga is a very beautiful place to be from.
oh, right. Yeah, I have no doubt. I mean, I did see some pictures of it for sure. It would probably influence your aesthetic sensibility and
Mm.
your visual sense, no doubt. I mean, he would later go and live on the French, on the I think on the Mediterranean,
On the
again,
Riviera?
yeah, in France, and he was very like the beach was very much his happy place. He would always
Mm.
go back to that, right? Um, It is certain that some of the very earliest Picassos were drawn in the dirt of the Plaza de la Merced, and as he had no inhibitions about the living form, it is probable that they were not sterile abstractions. He very soon acquired a mastery of this technique, and it stayed with him. As a very old man in years, he would still start a drawing anywhere at all, just as he had done when he was a little boy, amazing his cousins Concha and Maria by beginning a dog or a cock at any point they chose to name, the claws, the tail, or by cutting the forms out of paper with his aunt's embroidery scissors on the same terms. Curiously enough, this calligraphy never overflowed into his writing, except for some early labored inscriptions he always wrote like a cat. All right, so he had that natural talent. It also says here Picasso had a prodigious memory, both for forms and for events. He could remember learning to walk with the help of a biscuit tin, and he could remember his sister's birth when he was 3. The circumstances of his sister's birth were striking enough, to be sure. Don Jose was gossiping with friends in the back room of an apothecary shop one evening in December 1884 when the bottles shot from their shelves with a crash. Earthquakes are common enough in those fiery regions for no one to sit pondering when they begin. Everyone darted into the open, and Don Jose ran home up the stairs, seized his heavily pregnant wife, his cloak, his son, and ran down into the square. Pablo was wrapped in the folds of the cloak, and his face peered out, and he saw that his mother had a kerchief over her head, a sight hitherto unknown and deeply memorable. They hurried along the Calle de la Victoria, right along to the far end, skirting the here we go, Gibraltar. Here we go to Manor de Grain's little one-story house built solidly on the rock. De Grain was visiting Rome at the time, but they settled in, and here Picasso's sister Maria de los Dolores Lola was born. The earthquake killed over 1,000, devastating the whole
Oh,
region,
wow.
and the cholera epidemic of the following year killed at least another 100,000 more. All right.
Damn.
Yeah. So late 19th century, and one of his lovers died a few years ago. So this is fun and interesting to me
Yeah.
that, far away, but not that far away at the same time. All right. I do have a little bit about the general sort of ambient Catholicism that would be in this a
Hmm.
place like this, the One True Faith. You're welcome. As for the traditional Catholicism in which he was brought up, a most significant aspect of Picasso's relationship to it is his silence. Apart from such set pieces of his boyhood as the First Communion and the old woman receiving holy oil from a choir boy, he did these like kind of rote, typical expected paintings, and he could mimic
Mm.
anybody. He could do any style. This would later appear in his cubism. He would have this conversation with Brock, and then he had sort of ongoing painterly conversations with certain other painters. I think Matisse, especially. He and Matisse
Mm.
had this like almost dueling sort of thing. Very interesting. So let's see. He painted some biblical scenes and a few imprecise hagiographical pictures. He produced almost nothing with an evident religious bearing until the crucifixion drawings of 1927, his strange cavalry of 1930, and the 1932 drawing based on the Isenheim altarpiece. Then silence again until the Christ figures in the bullfight engravings of 1959, although many other painters, atheist, agnostic, Jewish, vaguely Christian, or ardently Catholic, were working for the church. In any case, although this is no more than a tentative hypothesis, it seems to me that Picasso, however desperately lapsed, did retain a certain residual Catholicism at some level of his being, an affectionate or perhaps a cautious respect for the old church that showed itself in this silence and in the nature of these occasional outbursts. All right. Apart from anything else, he looked upon his sacramental marriage as something different in kind from his other connections, shall we say. And it is perhaps significant that as he came into the world with the rights of the church, so he left it with at least some of them. All right. He was very interested in bullfighting. Saying here in
Yeah.
1891 in Malaga, the 10-year-old Picasso was more concerned with the ritual of the bull ring than with any other sacrifice, and he recorded it diligently. Um, but the days of his ordered natural life were coming to an end. He now had a second sister, Concepcion, born in 1887, and the flat was by so much smaller. His father was growing even more withdrawn, and then, in a decision that caused great unhappiness, the municipality finally closed the museum. You're out of work. There had never been any margin for living in the Ruiz family, and this blow was disastrous. So his
Oh.
father finds a post at La Coruña. He was to teach drawing and decoration at a provincial school. Um, It's in Galicia on the Atlantic coast of Spain, a great way off in the north, and obviously the whole family would have to live there. Um, all at once, Don Jose became aware that his son was, if not wholly illiterate, then something very like it.
Mm.
Illiteracy and a total inability to add two and two would, for the first time, have mattered little in his native city, or for the time being, excuse me, have mattered little in his native city, where friends and connections would naturally stand by the boy. But in a remote and savage province like Galicia, the rules would have to be obeyed, at least by strangers. And to get into any school, Pablo would have either to pass an entrance exam or present a certificate of competence. There was no possibility of his passing an exam in any subject but drawing. No
Wow.
possibility at all. Isn't that wild? So Don Jose went to see a friend who had the power of granting certificates. Very well, said the friend, but in common decency, the child should at least appear to be examined. The child appeared, and after some fruitless questions of a general nature, the child remaining mute, the examiner presented him with a sum: 3 plus 1 plus 40 plus 66 plus 38, telling him kindly how to write it down and begging him not to be nervous. The first attempt was not wholly successful, and the sum had to be written again. This time, when he showed it up, Pablo noticed that the examiner had made the addition himself on a scrap of paper, left obviously in sight. He memorized the figure, returned to his desk, wrote down the answer, drew a line beneath it with some complacency, and received his certificate. All right, so they took to the sea, and then they moved to this next town. Um, they're in this like sort of strange land, and this is amazing that he was not. Um, he was illiterate at 10. I mean, he was not reading, but he could draw incredibly. And yeah, so all right. And
Sounds
he's
like some kind of neurodivergency.
well, yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, it's entirely possible. So I've got a little more here. And then I got to go to the second book here.
Hmm.
Uh, to deepen the story. From the very start, it was clear Picasso was no ordinary child. In fact, his first word was reportedly piz, a baby talk attempt at lapis, the Spanish word for pencil. He could draw
Hmm.
before he spoke. Drawing was in his blood. His father was an academic painter and art teacher. And I've just got a little bit about his father because, of course, at a very young age, Pablo would crush his father, would beat his father in a very, very direct way. And I think that may have shaped and influenced sort of his ego and his attitude.
Mm.
He's a young man who conquered his father early. Um, let's see. So Jose Ruiz y Biasco was known by his family name as Pepe. He was born in Malaga, Spain in 1838 and grew up in a middle-class family. At 42 years of age, he married Maria Picasso Lopez, who was 17 years younger than him. Nothing strange at the time. The couple had three children. Pablo was born in October of 81. Dolores, who was nicknamed Lola, was born in 84. And Concepcion, who was nicknamed Conchita, was born in 87. When Pablo was 13 years old, Conchita died at the age of 7 from diphtheria.
Oh.
So here we have an unfortunately classic story that we
Mm.
we find often in Art of Darkness subjects. I mean, death happens, but to witness that in your family when you were 13 and really kind of cognizant and aware. And then
Yeah.
I can only assume seeing the effect on your parents, it must have been devastating. Um, and of course, we can easily speculate that it probably had an impact on his attitude toward death. What do you
Hmm.
think, Abby? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, no doubt.
Although there's something strange about when you hear stories about people in those times, the 1800s, the 1700s, and it's sort of like, oh, they had 12 kids, but four of them died or whatever, and it's presented in such a way that it seems like it's just an everyday occurrence and you get on with your life, and no one really
Right.
talks about how what the impact of that would have been on
Right.
the parents, on the brothers and sisters. It just sort of seems like oh well, it happened. It
Sure.
was a common thing, so you just get on with it. But
Indeed, yeah, and of course, this was toward the end of the 19th century, and
mm,
right on the edge of sort of these things not being perhaps as common. But he lived
yeah.
that, and he saw that, and So, in any case, early in his son's life, his father recognized his talent. He began to teach him art at the age of 7. Pablo completed his first painting, Le Petit Picador Jaunet, at the age of 8. His father believed that the best way to learn art was to copy the great masters. In
Hmm.
1892, he enrolled Pablo in the Fine Arts School in Coruña, where Picasso developed his drawing skills. At the age of 13, he started to attend the School of Belles Arts in Barcelona. His father was impressed by his son's talent, but they maintained a volatile relationship. In Barcelona, Ruiz Blasco was a model for his son's artwork, and Pablo made numerous portraits of his father. Ruiz also helped his son to create some of his artworks, including Science and Charity. He, we're going to win a prize, right? He also rent, he also rented a studio to help Picasso to work. So he really did have, the support of his father and his family. Um,
Was it Picasso who had the quote, good artists borrow, great artists steal?
I don't know. Let's see. Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Who said that? Let's see. Attribution. Yeah, Picasso. Very good.
Ah, maybe he
Yeah,
learnt it from his father.
it's entirely possible. That is a great quote. For whatever reason, I did not know that that was a Picasso-ism, but that's great. And of course, that's true. I mean, if you look at his work and his whole trajectory, it makes perfect sense.
Hmm.
And he had a quote that was really devastating, and I was going to get to it later, but let me pull it up. It was from it's quoted in the Marina biography memoir, the
The
very
the
difficult, yeah,
dark memoir.
the dark memoir. And here's the quote: "To make a dove, you must first wring its neck." And his art would do that. He would break things and reassemble them. He would break
Hmm.
people. He would break people and reassemble them. He was a tinkerer, and he saw the world differently. And then, of course, he would do this with other painters and other. He saw everything, and he would go find sources for everything. We'll come to it in not too long a time, but the first really major modern painting was influenced by African masks, I believe, different
Mm.
sort of kinds of masks that he went to see. And he always played it off like he just stumbled on them and he wasn't really, but he was very, very pointed and intentional about what he was doing. And a total chameleon of style. Like puts David Bowie to shame. Like and that's saying a lot. I'm a huge Bowie guy. I think everybody knows that. All right, so um, now I have a bit from the more favorable family biography. Let me find my page, and then Abby, I'll open it up to you a little bit just to sort of see where you are with him when it
Hmm.
feels like a good break. Pablo's first true encounter with death took place on January 10th, 1895. His little sister Conchita died of diphtheria at the age of 8. Pablo was then 13 and hadn't yet fully decided to become a painter. He didn't really care much for school and, quite frankly, preferred the punishment he would receive, which consisted of being put into a little solitary confinement cell. There, at least, he had some peace and quiet and could
Oh,
spend his
wow.
time drawing. Just before his sister's death, however, that's intense. He challenged the heavens. He would sacrifice his talent and give up the idea of becoming a painter if little Conchita were to get well again. But
Oh,
Conchita didn't get well. God had been heartless. Furthermore, by blasphemously equating his sister's life with his mere talent, he had surely invoked the Creator's wrath. He, Pablo, had been responsible for her death. On the other hand, it was perhaps a sign that God wanted him to be a painter. And this predestination placed him above all other people, as it had already placed him above the life of Conchita. In lieu of a divine gesture, a certain magic could possibly be detected behind all this, and Pablo was perhaps the appointed alchemist. All right. Jean Lemarie, art critic and friend of my grandfather, with whom I consulted at length, confirmed the importance of this painful episode. He who had already felt an irrepressible calling and who was seen as a prodigy to whom even his father yielded, had vowed that if she survived, he would give up painting. This was a most extraordinary thing. However, she died. His wish had not been granted. And from that moment on, he became committed. That's how I see it. For whether or not he was Faustian or agnostic, he had a deeply religious spirit. And because of that, his commitment was total. A willpower beyond himself was at work. In the typically Spanish manner, he engaged his entire fate and what he loved most in life. Heaven didn't grant his wish and thus confirmed his vocation of becoming a painter. And he had absolutely no right whatsoever to misuse his power. All right. That is an intense kind of,
That's very intense.
yeah. It's an intense little kind of spell he put on himself there, right? I mean,
Hmm.
and direct to God, save her, and I will give up this natural gift I have, and then she dies. Devastating. And that really tells you everything about where he was at emotionally and intellectually at 13. He was there and he knew what was happening, and it wasn't, just flying by him, and yeah, what an origin story. It's like a movie for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. Right. And according to family lore, when Pablo was around 13, his father recognized the boy's talent had surpassed his own and vowed to give up painting entirely rather than compete with his child. It's a legend, perhaps embellished, but it speaks to Picasso's precocity. By his early teens, he was already producing accomplished realist work. Um, you could go and find all of these, right? One early oil painting, The Barefoot Girl, was painted when he was just 13. And we will go into some of the major works a little more deeply as we get further into his sort of advancement development. We'll talk about the blue period. You know
Hmm.
anything about the blue period, Abby?
I don't know much about the Blue Period. No,
You're going to learn about the blue
I'm
period.
gonna find
It
out.
was it was the blue period was predicated on a friend's suicide
Oh,
over unrequited love. And he went blue. Okay, yeah, fun, right? Oh yeah, we're gonna get to Paris and all the Bohemians. They're all crazy and poor and running around and drinking and in whorehouses and in other brothels and in more brothels and drinking and all of that. It's that
you can't do
Bohemian.
that these days.
Well, it's all online now, isn't it, Abby? The House of the Rising Sun you can log into now, right? Yeah, there's less exchange of fluids that way, right? It's more, I mean, I don't know. I assume. I mean, anyway. Yeah, I'm going to go a little further, Abby, and then I want to sort of see where you're at with
Hmm.
Pablo, so I can stand up. I gotta go blow my nose here. Let's see. I'm pulling up the Picasso book again, and we already know they moved to Barcelona, and that happens in 1895.
Hmm.
So the big city for sure, a big city. Um, let's see what I have. All right. Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about his talent, right? The next year, when Picasso was still 13, he painted many more pictures, several of which have come down to us. There's not much point in describing them in detail, but they show many different lines of approach, many different techniques, always more assured. Among them is his dog Clipper, one of the earliest in the long series of Picasso's animals: cats, mice, apes, pigeons, an incontinent goat, turtle doves, owls, and always dogs. Clipper is a brownish yellow creature, a basic dog of medium size, more smooth than rough, an intelligent head with a large knowing eye. The picture has all the marks of a good portrait, and it is painted without the least trace of sentimentality. Picasso's relations with his animals were very close. He had an extraordinary gift for entering into direct contact with them, could handle a wild bird or walk up to a furious dog when most people would have provoked an ugly scene. And the tired old cliche about the power of the human eye finds its justification in Picasso. He had, in fact, a most luminous and striking eye, a singular, penetrating gaze, always the first thing that people noticed. But these relations were quite unlike those which are usual in Anglo Saxon countries. A child brought up on the spectacle of slaughtered bulls does not have the same reactions as one brought up on Flopsy Bunnies or the products of Walt
Mm.
Disney's Muse. Picasso did not shift his animals to a semi-human plane. He met them on their own. He loved cats, not the sleek, castrated, fat, domesticated creatures, not pussies, but the rangy, feral cats of the southern gutter who will fly in your face at the drop of a hat. His animals lived according to their own codes, more or less, with no undue notions of right or wrong, nor of cleanliness imposed from above. All right, so just a little picture of sort of his attitude at the time and what he's painting. And Yeah, so his family moves to Barcelona in 1895. At just 14, he passed the entrance exam in record time to the prestigious Loggia Art Academy. Though technically gifted, Picasso bristled at formal instruction. Are we surprised by that at all?
No.
No. I would rather be in solitary confinement with my drawings than among you people. That's a very funny fact. I don't doubt it. Um, he was a rebellious student, often punished for breaking rules. He later said he would use his detention hours to paint freely in his own style, turning punishment into creativity. By his late teens, Picasso was already exhibiting his work. In 1900, at age 18, and this is a critical moment, he visited Paris for the first time. Maybe the greatest love of his
Mm,
life. The greatest lady of his life was probably Paris.
mm.
To be maybe a little bit clever there. Then the center of the art world, and he was awestruck by the works of Degas, Toulouse-Lautrec, and Van Gogh. Van Gogh. I heard it so many different ways when I was researching this. I'm just going to say
Yeah,
Van Gogh. Yeah, Van Gogh, Van Gogh, Van Gogh.
Van
You
Gogh.
know, Van Gogh. He would soon make Paris his base, but his Spanish upbringing remained a vital part of his identity. He never did become a French citizen and was long regarded as a foreigner in France. And that's very interesting because when he passed
Mm,
away, there was no big state funeral for Picasso in France, although his
mm.
identity was so much about the French and France, whereas Georges Braque was given a complete. I mean, the French take care of their artists, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, he was given a state funeral like a general or a president had died, a major figure. Um, so fun. Um, so I think we could see even in these early years, there's darkness, right?
Hmm.
Here's an anecdote. Picasso had a habit of carrying a revolver loaded with blanks, which he would fire into
Oh.
the air when conversations bored him. Abby, you need to get one of those for when I. Brad should have had one of those, years
Oh
ago.
man.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know how many times I would get arrested if if I
yeah,
had a revolver
yeah.
to stop boring conversations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was shooting blanks, but you noticed. This is another one that's interesting. He nearly didn't survive infancy. Picasso was a
Oh.
weak newborn and was declared stillborn until an uncle
Hmm.
revived him by blowing cigar smoke in the baby's face. Perhaps an omen that Picasso was destined to cheat death for a while, at least. And I say sometimes a cigar isn't just a cigar, it's a life saving device. You bring cigars to a birth for a reason, right? Congratulations. It might save your life. Seriously.
Like CPR with some cigar smoke.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming to the end of sort of part one here, Abby, and I'm going to hand it off to you for 90 seconds so I can just stand up and handle some business here. The prodigy has arrived. Now
Hmm.
Picasso is in his late teens, splitting time between Spain and Paris, looking for direction. And direction comes, unfortunately, with tragedy, which leads us into his first major artistic period, which, of course, I have already hinted. But Abby, while I stand up here real quick, tell me where are you at with Picasso? Has anything surprised you? And are you rooting for him at all, or are you still maybe feeling a little bit unsure about the man?
Uh, I think I'm probably still a little bit unsure, but he did sound like an intense kid. Um, I guess it's interesting to me to think about a kid in the late 1800s who doesn't speak till he's 10 because I imagine the times being as they were, there was probably a lot less sympathy for that or understanding. And how would he have been treated? We don't really have a sense of like necessarily how like the other kids treated him. His father also sounded really intense. There's a lot of intensity around the kind of black and white bargaining way in which the Picasso family see the world. It's sort of, if my sister doesn't die, I'll give up my talent, and then if my son is better than me, then I'll give up my talent. And it's like there could have been a lot more balance around these people and how they dealt with things, I think. But uh, the the earthquake with the birth of the sister and the bullfighting are all quite intense things to experience as a child. Like bullfighting it's awful. Yeah, I haven't ever seen it in person, but we did a philosophy class at film school, and the philosophy teacher had spent some time in Spain and was showing us videos of bullfighting and talking a bit about like the ethos behind it and how the matador is supposed to be like a woman and the bull is supposed to be like a man and he's sort of teasing him to death, and then finally kills him. But what a awful sport, and to witness that as a child, um, it could be quite twisted.
They
Yeah, and
loved
then
it. They love it. I mean,
earthquakes
that's
and
yeah, yeah, that's their thing though. They love it. That was the culture. That was their, they loved it. They loved the Matadors. They loved all of it, right? But you're
yeah.
right. I mean, it's sort of it is a little alien to think about.
Mm,
Death early, intensity early, earthquakes early, dead sister early, overcoming your father
yeah.
early, mute or like illiterate and
Yeah.
not able to communicate. It's just a
And
very interesting.
I wonder, did he start drawing because he saw his father drawing, or did his father introduce him to drawing as a way to be like, will you communicate with me somehow, please?
Right, right.
Um, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna
Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
Anything
weird
else?
little kid.
Yeah, and the makings of a great artist for sure. We've got the sort of
Yeah.
cauldron brewing, and you can sort of see how he didn't just fall out of some sort of content middle class family in a
No.
nondescript city, right? He's the product of his times and his environment,
But
and
yeah,
also his.
what an inciting incident, like
Oh yeah.
if
hmm
my little sister died when I promised to give away my talent, so now I must make 50,000 pieces of art.
Yes, absolutely. I'm still in the Patrick O'Brien Picasso biography, and we're going to move to this
Mhm.
tragedy. But I want to point out too that at 19 he already had like a small contract to produce paintings
Mm.
and to be paid for them. So few unknown painters, just 19 years old, who had never seen 150 francs all in one golden mass, nor yet the promise of a year's independent, carefree living, ever had such an offer. Fewer still would not have been overjoyed, filled with an elastic excitement and delight renewed every waking day for weeks, and none would have refused to sign it.
Mm.
Picasso signed, but his joy was diminished, if not done away with, by the state of Casagemas, his friend, a fellow painter. He perceived that the unhappy man was drinking himself sodden and that he was getting worse day by day. It is said that Picasso had promised to spend Christmas with his family in Barcelona. He may well have done so. In his unwillingness to give immediate pain, he would very often make large promises for tomorrow, next week, next month, or another time, but he rarely felt bound where the future was concerned. Whether or no, as December wore on, it became clear that Casagemas would have to be taken away. He was in great danger in Paris. Between the train that had brought Picasso north and the train that was now taking him south again, only some 60 days had elapsed. They were 60 days into which he had crammed an enormous amount of experience. He had seen a very great number of pictures. He had seen the exhibition, the Grand Palais and the Petit Palais, with friezes colored at so much the yard by a host of needy painters, including Matisse and Marquette. The great telescope, the moving pavement, and the official pavilions of the various nations, including that of Spain, in which there were pictures by Carbonero and other worthies known to Picasso. But only Zulaga excited much favorable comment. The papers called him the new-born Goya. As for the attractions, he probably left them to one side. They were expensive and rather dreary for the most part. One hoped to discover Sodom and Gomorrah, said one visitor. All one found was the Dead Sea. um, Paris' reputation precedes it, right? He had seen a
Hmm.
brilliant nightlife, very unlike the dives of Barcelona. And although his had been no more than a foreigner's Paris, he had seized some essential aspects, both within himself and in the form of several paintings and many, many drawings. And as well as his sick, distracted friend, he took with him a contract that meant his freedom, his living, and perhaps recognition. Yet, Casagemas was his main concern. After a few days at home in Barcelona, which did Casagemas no good, Picasso took him down to Malaga, the sun, the total change of air and scene, the New Year festivities with aunts, uncles, and cousins would set him up. But the sun of Malaga was cold, Picasso's family distant. The Ruiz affair and his conduct in Madrid were still rankling. They did not ask him or his unkempt and now unpresentable friend to stay, and they had to take a room somewhere. Even there, the woman of the house would not let them in until Picasso told her who his relations were. Malaga was no longer home. He's just down and out, and
Wow.
he's living. He's got this contract, but he's got this like bum friend who's like drinking himself to death over a woman, right? Um, all right, so they eventually flee. He goes to Madrid. Casagemas traveled on, reaching Paris early in 1901. He was in better physical shape now, and on February 17th, he wrote a large number of letters. Always a good sign, right?
Hmm.
Manolo came to see him in the Boulevard de Clichy, and Casagemas welcomed him kindly, promised him help, and asked him to dinner that same evening. On the way, they posted the letters. You could see this coming down Main Street, right? In the restaurant just at hand, they were joined by Polares, the Catalan art collector Alexandra Riera, Odette, and Germain, their little bohemian scene. It was a good dinner, and they drank several bottles of wine. Casagemas seemed nervous and on edge, and toward the end of the meal, he stood up to make a speech in French, which Manolo did not then understand. While he was still speaking, he darted his hand to his pocket. Germaine saw the pistol coming and ducked. The bullet only grazed the back of her neck. Manolo grappled with him, but Casagemas wrenched the gun up to his temple, fired, and died within an hour. All right.
Oh,
So
wow.
fun. And so his friend commits suicide over
And
a woman.
this is the blue period, friend.
This is the blue period, friend. Yeah, this is where the blue period kicks off, right? So he's seen Paris. He spent time in Paris. He had a
Hmm.
painting exhibited there, I believe. Very young. He's offered a contract,
Hmm.
which now looks penny ante relative to what his paintings are worth now, but at the time was a lifeline for him.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
he's distanced from his family. He has very little French, but
Hmm.
he was able to. There was a sort of an expatriate community there. You could get by on Spanish and etc. And then his friend, you know, kills himself. So fun. Um, and I've got a little bit of Carlos's bio here, just real quick. He's known for his friendship with Picasso, who painted several
Hmm.
portraits of him. Casagemas fell in love with Germaine, a model they had portrayed, and of course these models were very critical. I mean, you start reading these biographies, and it's the model and the muse, right? And they very often would become lovers, and it was this
Mm.
relationship that was just not bound by any conventions we would sort of anticipate today. Yeah, so Casagemas was unable to consummate the relationship due to impotence. This, along with his
So
descent into,
young.
yeah, I don't know. It sounds like Casagemas maybe should have put the bottle down. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, whiskey dick is real, even in Paris, right? This, along with his descent
Too
into
much
depression.
Pernod.
Yeah, right. This, along with his descent into depression and mood swings, led to several suicide attempts. Casagemas attempted suicide once more in a Paris cafe during a farewell dinner party he held for himself. This time he was successful, and he died at a hospital. That evening, this event is widely recognized as inspiring Picasso's blue period. All right. Um, so
Well, and
Casagemas,
always at dinner parties.
right.
It's very dramatic of him.
It really is. Yeah. He tried to take this poor model out too. I mean, really kind of a not a good move, but I mean, it sounds like he was suffering from real serious mental illness. So I
Yeah.
try not to judge too much, but thank goodness he missed her and
Mm.
yeah, but Picasso was just devastated the Casagemas came from an upper class family, and these are just the Bohemians. They literally called themselves the Barcelona Bohemian Group, right? These are the sort of template for that idea that we have of these like groups flitting
Mm.
around these big cities, and we're all going to be great artists, and then eventually everybody moves to the suburbs and settles down, right? Or starts a podcast. I don't know. Lots of different things can happen. Um, so yeah. There you go. So one of Picasso's portraits accompanied Casagemas's obituary 9 days later. Picasso returned to Paris in May of 1901, resumed residence in the studio that he had shared with Casagemas, so they were roommates. Um,
Mm.
and these studios, too, the way it was described is like there's one crummy toilet shared by like the whole building. It's that kind of place, right?
Mm.
And I mean, they're just living among their paints, and that's it, right? But they're in Paris, right? They're at the center of the
Yeah.
world. Um, yeah, he visited the site of Casa Games' suicide and eventually had an affair with Germaine.
No.
Yes. Yeah, and Germaine remained part
And
of Picasso's.
did he torture her?
I'm not sure if she's in our. I don't know if she's in our list of the main character women. I don't think she is. So no, I mean, it sounds like that she maybe dodged a bullet there, Abby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but she remained part of his life for many years and was later one of the models depicted in the big painting, the big painting, La Demoiselle d'Avignon. Are you familiar with this
Right.
one?
Yes.
Yes, you
Yeah.
know that one. Okay, and that's a major painting created modern art. Essentially, it's like the cornerstone piece. And even when it appeared, people didn't really understand what the hell was going on. So now, in any event, that sounds like a relationship that was not marked by too much torture. All right, let's see. What do I have here? Oh, I scrolled too far forward. Going on here, we are going to do the blue period. Oh boy, this outline, I tell you. All right. So yeah, he plunged into the blue period, right? Kind of blue. We right. So the subjects were somber, and starting in late 1901, he painted a series of posthumous portraits of Casagemas, as if exercising his grief on the canvas. One of the
Mm.
most famous blue period works, La Vie, is believed to be a tribute to Casagemas. A tall, gaunt figure based on his late friend confronts a mother and child, symbolizing the cycle of death and rebirth. And if you want to go look up La Vie, Lavie. You can follow along. It's a rather beautiful painting. You can see sort of hints at his future style emerging. There's certain qualities of realism. There's a lot of symbolism in this. There's a certain
Oh.
naive quality, and of course he's honoring his friend and sort of mourning his
Mm.
friend. He painted that in Barcelona in May of 1903, and yeah, it was painted at a time when Picasso was having no financial success. In contrast, the new painting sold only a month after it was finished to a French art dealer, Jean Saint Gaudens. The sale was reported in the Barcelona newspaper. With La Vie, Picasso repainted the canvas, etc. So in any event, so it sounds like that painting actually sold, and it has a whole big Wikipedia article. It's worth looking into. So yeah, Blue Period, and it is now at the Cleveland Museum of Art. It shows a spectral, gaunt Casagemas standing with a woman confronting a mother with a child in her arms. The scene is
Mm.
mysterious and allegorical, often interpreted as representing the cycle of life after Casagemas' suicide, or perhaps Picasso's confrontation with life and death. X-rays reveal Picasso originally painted something else under it, but changed it to this scene, likely in memory of Casagemas. La Vie, which simply means life, stands as the culminating blue period work, and it is rather basic, but the idea here is that he's turning pain into beauty, right? He's
Mm.
not letting his friend go that easily, and the blue period paintings depict society's outcasts, beggars, prostitutes, the blind, the desperate. And he was practically penniless himself at the time, and he would yeah, he would use the theme of blindness as a metaphor for isolation, and he later said of this time, I started painting in blue when I learned of Casagemas's death. Indeed, the suicide of Casagemas was the catalyst. It's a poignant example of personal darkness directly shaping an artist's work. All right. There are other influences too. He traveled to Spain in 1901, visiting prisons and hospitals, and drew inspiration from Spanish religious art. He was also likely influenced by the symbolist painters and the mood of the, help me say this, fin de secle art. Do you know how to say that? In any event,
How do you spell it?
yeah, I'll put it in the chat for you. It is
Okay.
again, my French is atrocious, and I beg every. I even looked this up, and I'm like, I've got so many things to juggle here, I cannot nail that. It's just a period, right? It's
Fin
yeah.
de siècle.
It just means
I have no idea.
all it means is the end of the century, especially the
Right.
19th century. That's all it means. Okay, easy. I'm just going to say the
It
mood of the end of the century art henceforth. Okay, you're not here
okay.
for my French, I promise. Um,
It isn't. I'm
yeah,
just looking at the painting now, and it is interesting to see how, no, when you think of Picasso's work, you think of the more abstract, modern, style that he does, and this is very Renaissance looking.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Looks,
it did say
I mean, little more Byzantinian is what I meant to say.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
It looks like a religious painting.
Right, right. I mean, and that's not a surprise. I mean, we just read that he was influenced
Mm,
by Spanish religious art. So, great artists steal, and he's stealing, and he's planning these pictures. He's thinking
mm,
about them. He's saying, how do I touch this feeling, in the most direct way, I guess, or
mhm.
how do I structure this so I can pour my feeling into it? It's not These are not happenstance. He's not just flinging paint up. He's very deeply thoughtful and trained, classically trained, if you will. Um, so
And
yeah,
the male figure has so in a lot of like these old Byzantinian paintings, which are usually of the Virgin Mary holding Jesus as baby, they have the baby Jesus who often doesn't look realistically like a baby because it feels like a lot of these Byzantinian artists never actually saw a baby in real life. But they have the baby pointing his finger out, and in this Levi painting, the male figure has his hand pointing in a very particular way. It'd be interesting to know if an art historian has interpreted what that might be, but it does look like the way the baby Jesus points in these Byzantinian paintings.
there you are, and it's certainly symbolic, and I'm sure we could linger over it a while. And actually, I like this, Abby. You've just sort of an impromptu advanced the structure of our episode. So, yeah, in as much as we were talking about Picasso's women and Picasso's paintings, I think it's a good approach that when I draw attention to one of these major works, you examine it and tell us what's happening. Are you? I'm going to spring
I
that
mean I
on you.
could try. I have year 12 and 13 art history at my disposal, and that is about it.
Listen, I mean, the whole point of this podcast is that we don't always wear the mantle of expertise. That's the point, right? We invite the audience in to learn with us, which I think is somewhat refreshing, right? You hear these other podcasts and everybody's the expert and so and so. And it's like we're
Mm.
not. We're learning along with you all, and it is part of the fun. So, Abby, I am gonna bring you in to do that again, okay? You're on the hook now. Abby did not
Oh
know.
no.
No, you'll be all right. It's good. It gives people a break from me. Um, so yeah, I mean, he barely out of his teens. And if you'd asked me before, when was his blue period? I would have had no idea. I would have
Mm-mm.
assumed it was later on, right? But he produced a body of work
Yeah,
so
that's what I
bleak.
thought too.
Yeah, people are shocked that somebody so young painted it. In any case, painted these paintings. By 1904, Picasso had moved permanently to Paris, settling in a dilapidated artist building called the Lavoie in Montmartre. The gloom of the blue period began to lift, helped by new friendship and a new love. Nothing like that to lift the fog, to lift the blue. And we're going to go into the rose period. All right.
uh,
The famous Rose period of Picasso. His fortune slowly improved in Paris. He made artist friends, found patrons, and crucially fell in love. In late 1904, he met Fernand Olivier, born Amélie Lang, a French artist model with flaming red hair.
hmm.
Fernand moved in with Picasso in Montmartre and became his first great love and muse. And I'm going to read about her. All right. She was a French artist and model, known primarily for having been the model and first muse of Picasso. Um, he painted over 60 portraits of Olivier. Olivier was born in Paris on the 6th of June, 1881, of an out of wedlock relationship between her mother and a married man. Ouch. She was raised by an aunt and
Mm-mm.
uncle who attempted to arrange a marriage for her. Instead, Olivier ran away and married a man who abused her. In 1900, when she was 19 years old, she left her husband without a formal divorce and moved to Paris. Scandal after scandal. She changed her name so that her husband could not find her. This is great because it paints a picture of who he's among.
Mm.
Olivier quickly found work modeling for artists and was known in Montmartre as La Belle Fernande. She was the beautiful Fernande, right? something like that. She was a fixture
Yep.
in the circle of friends of writer Apollinaire, where she also became friends with other folks. And She met Picasso at the Bateau Lavoie, okay, in 1904, and by the next year they were living together. Their relationship lasted 7 years and was characterized by its tempestuousness. And I remember learning about this for the first time, and this is pretty gnarly, okay? Picasso would often lock Olivier in their apartment when he went out due to jealousy. Olivier wrote in her diary, Picasso, due to a sort of morbid jealousy, kept me as a recluse. But with tea, books, a divan, and little cleaning to do, I was happy, very happy. So he locked me up and I was fine with it.
Uh,
I mean, she sounds a little damaged, and
yeah.
Pablo is probably a little damaged too. That's not good. I would not encourage anyone to take that approach. Although, I suppose if you're consenting, it's you can be okay with it, but that's not how it's framed. It's framed as Picasso locked me in, but I had my books and things. Okay, I don't love it. In any event, um,
Mm. Tempestuous is
yeah.
such a romantic word to give abusive relationships.
Yeah, it sounds more romantic than it is, doesn't it? It's like a
Mm.
storm, right? Um, all right, so he was able to sell some artwork, and they were able to finance a trip to Barcelona and to the remote village of Gosel in the Spanish Pyrenees. She met his family, and he worked prolifically. Uh, so yeah, and some of his most notable Cubist work comes from is inspired by her.
Mhm.
He would rarely have a model sit. Something to know about Picasso. Many of
Okay.
the artists, I think Matisse contra Picasso, Matisse would sit very close to the models, almost like uncomfortably close.
Mm.
Picasso went from memory. I mean, we
Right.
said earlier he had this,
He had a great memory
yeah.
to form.
Even his children would say, I only sat for him once. I mean, so
Mm.
it's an important thing to understand about his work, let's see. He later admitted that one of the ladies of Avignon who we're going to cover was modeled on her. Um, in April of 1907, Olivier went to a local orphanage and adopted a 13-year-old girl, Raymond. The small family did not last, however, and upon discovering explicit drawings of Raymond made by Picasso, Olivier sent
Oh
the girl
no.
back to the orphanage. Wee wee wee. Don't love that. That I'm not going to say the word.
As
You
soon
don't.
as you said 13-year-old girl, I was like, oh, this isn't gonna go well.
Yikes. Not great. Don't love that. What are you going to do? She goes back to the orphanage, all right?
Hmm.
And he's starting to paint the Rose period, right? And these paintings they often feature circus performers, acrobats, harlequins, which would become a serious theme for him. Many Rose period figures are harlequins in diamond pattern costumes, a motif that became a personal symbol for Picasso. Art historian John Richardson notes that the overall feeling of Picasso's work lightened. The Rose period paintings have a generally upbeat and optimistic mood. He's getting laid, reminiscent of his pre-blue
Yeah.
youth. I mean, let's be real. You could feel Picasso's affection for Fernand in the warmer, more tender imagery in works
Mm.
like Boy with a Pipe or Family of Acrobats. There's a gentleness absent from the blue period. And of course, Fernand appeared in many of these. So,
There
you
is
can,
one here that looks like oh, what is the name of this called?
go on.
I'm just trying to find uh Le Lapin Agile or Harlequin with a glass. It
Hmm.
looks like is it a the absinthe drinkers?
Ah, okay. All right. Right.
Back on his tour of stealing the
Who
absinthe
who
drinkers.
painted the
I'm
absinthe?
just trying to find out. I think it was Degas. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Degas.
Okay. Yep. I mean, and that would be intentional. And if you're noticing those
Yeah,
things, it's certainly he's mimicking the style. And the Harlequin for him, I think, is sort of symbolic of himself and of his
right.
dressing up, changing roles, and all of that. So he's aware that he's tinkering with other people's styles and other people's
Mm.
ideas to try to create something that's his own. All right. So very good. Thank you, Abby. There's another one you could see called Woman in a Camise. How do you say that?
Chemise.
Chemise. Thank you. Yeah,
Sh
that
Chimay. Chemise.
chemise. Yeah, there you go. And that features for Nand if you want to see it. All right. All right.
Right.
All right. Good. I'm going to bring us to the end of this section. Uh,
That
so
must be very early because it's still blue.
is it? Okay. Well, in any case, maybe it's part of the blue period.
This
Let's see.
transitional period.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Is it entirely blue? No, no. There's color. I mean, it shows her hair and everything, her bright red
Yeah.
hair. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, he's transitioning out of the blue into the bright reds of his first muse and lover. All right. So as I've said, during this time he lived the classic bohemian artist life. He was often impoverished, but surrounded by creativity and intellectual ferment. His studio was a crude place, no heat, one source of water, but it became a gathering spot for up and coming artists. And who should come along but friend of the pod, recurring featured on the pod, never actually covered on the pod, but she finds her way into the show over and over again. Gertrude Stein.
Ah.
Ah, a nexus of this whole thing, right? The American writer and collector became one of Picasso's earliest patrons around 1905. Stein and her brothers Leo, Michael, and Michael's wife Sarah bought Picasso's paintings when few others would. Good call. Good return on
hmm
investment there, okay?
Good
I mean,
ROI, Picasso.
yeah. And at some point, Hemingway's lurking around here, and he bought a bunch of these pictures, and then eventually they would be confiscated by the Cuban government because it's a long story. But in any event, he
Oh,
writes
wow.
Hemingway writes about kind of this period in his great. I think the last thing that he was really working on, A Movable Feast. If you've not read it,
hmm
it is must read. It is a memoir of his first marriage and their time in Paris, semi-impoverished, kind of living this lifestyle as an American abroad and with American dollars. And he would talk about, and he was very funny because he kind of plays up his poverty, Hemingway. But they always have money to drink, and they
hmm
can save money by not buying new clothes, and instead they can buy pictures. So they could buy
Ah.
paintings. So poverty,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not buying pictures with my clothes money.
Yeah, right. So there you go. Um, So in any event, he's moving in those circles, and they welcomed the Steins, welcomed Picasso into their salon, where he mingled with
hmm
Henri Matisse, whom he met through Stein in 1905, and the poets and avant-garde of Paris. Picasso even painted Gertrude Stein's portrait in 1906. Famously, someone commented that Stein didn't look like her rather severe depiction. Picasso quipped, "She will look like it."
Oh,
A- And
shots
Stein,
fired.
really, Stein indeed grew into the mask-like face Picasso gave her, an example of his prescient artistic vision. And you can look up Picasso, Gertrude Stein, um, and Abby. I'm gonna take a quick stand-up break here. I want to give you this link. Can you read this copy from the Met Museum here? I'm putting the link in the chat. It's just
Yeah.
a paragraph, and then I don't know. Describe what you're seeing here in this image of Gertrude Stein. Let me know
Okay, if I
if
can
you
get
don't find
this
it. Yeah,
chat to
you'll get it.
open.
Yeah, I know. It's like
Uh,
yeah, it's fun. Lots of fun.
the Met
Zoo,
Museum. Okay.
you got it. All right.
I've got it. The famous writer and expatriate Gertrude Stein was among the first Americans to respond enthusiastically to European avant-garde art. She held weekly salons in her Paris apartment, populated by European and American artists and writers. For Picasso, Stein's early patronage and friendship was critical to his success. He painted this portrait of her between 1905 and 1906, at the end of his so-called Rose period. He reduces her body to simple masses, a foreshadowing of his adoption of Cubism, and portrays her face like a mask with heavy-lidded eyes, reflecting his recent encounter with Iberian sculpture. I am going to need to look up what Gertrude Stein looks like at the time. But yeah, it's a so the colors are a very brown palette, and she is very intensely it looks like she's in a listening mode with a very intense stare, um, which makes me wonder who would be speaking and what she thinks of what they're saying. But she does look, it does look like the portrait of an older woman. I don't know how old she was at the time. Yeah, it's just it's got a lot of intensity, and it it is starting to, like, I could see the cubism coming in here. It is starting to look a little more abstract than the stuff that we've seen, say, in the Blue Period and the pictures of the Harlequins and such.
Right. Yeah, very
I'm gonna
good.
look up what
Mhm.
she looks like.
Sure, sure. Just look up Gertrude Stein Paris days, right?
Oh, so
Yeah.
there's a side by side
Ah,
picture on a website called Smart History of
okay.
her wearing something very similar and in a very similar sort of pose
Hmm.
with a very similar look on her face. And I don't know whether this is her mimicking the painting or if he really did just predict what she would look like.
I mean,
I'm
well,
gonna
I mean, it looks like
find it
that
for you.
photograph was in 1913, so they may have been riffing on this a little bit, but also
Yeah,
it
it could
just
have been a
might have
riff.
been, yeah, it might have just been what she looked like, right? Um, but
But
yeah,
it actually is a good representation.
well, this is good because there's more here, right? The story goes that Stein sat for Picasso so many times, as many as 90 sittings, that eventually he said he could no longer see her when he looked at her. He then wiped out her
Wow.
face in the painting and left on a trip to Spain. When he returned to Paris in the fall, he quickly completed the portrait, supposedly from memory, in a way that challenged traditional expectations of portraiture. Most portraits tell us about the sitter through their physical likeness and expressive detail. Picasso instead showed his subject staring blankly past the viewer. And
Mm.
you notice the sort of the muted colors and things, and this palette is very similar to what we're about to see in the in Cubism, right?
Mm.
And a little more here. Painted in dull, muted colors, and this is from that website you just found, Abby. Stein's body fills Picasso's canvas. She sits on a large armchair or sofa and stiffly leans forward, imposing in the way she rests her arms and large hands heavily on the folds of her skirt. In contrast to the rounded forms of the figure, Stein's face has a plainer quality that seems hard and mask-like, an effect heightened by the geometric treatment of the eyes, nose, and mouth, and the dark modeling that distinguishes its angular contours from the rest of her head and body. His odd rendering of these features reflects the influence of African and Iberian art, but it
Mm.
may also allude to art's inability to reveal the truth about an individual. Like many European artists at the time, Picasso looked to ancient and non Western art as a source of primitive inspiration, a colonialist notion that viewed uncivilized cultures to be more spiritually authentic than the sophisticated cities of Europe. This is still an attitude you see. People just take this for granted, but it's something that, well, there are issues with it. So in any case, he brought some of that work to Stein's portrait in this sort of primitive style, and she said this. Her response to the image supports the point of view that Picasso claimed for himself the power to represent the woman as she really is, not merely as a likeness of her physical appearance. And this is what Stein said. She wrote a book on Picasso.
Mm.
I was and I still am satisfied with my portrait. For me, it is I, and it is the only reproduction of me, which is always I for me. So there you are. Very good. So I'm glad we were able to cover that. And we're going to move into the big, big, big painting. By 1906, he's about 24, gaining confidence. He has good friends, a supportive lover who he locks up, who doesn't seem to mind too much in their tempestuous relationship. And
What
he,
can she do but be supportive? Locked in the
what
house.
choice does she have, right? And So it goes. And he's soaking up influences, everything from African and Iberian art to the bold colors Matisse is using. This is the calm before the storm, because in the next year, Picasso will do something that changes the course of art. And this painting, they say, many say, kicked off modern art. All
Hmm.
right. And he does this with a painting called, in 1907, La Demoiselle d'Avignon. In the summer of 1907, he was hungry to push beyond anything he or anyone else had done. He's ready. He's ready to do his thing. He painted a it's very big, large radical canvas, which was originally called Le Bordel d'Avignon, or the brothel or bordello of Avignon, later known
Hmm.
as La Demoiselle d'Avignon, which I believe means the ladies of Avignon, right? It's a little bit, cheeky. Let me just make sure I've got that right. That's important. And Abby, I want you to pull this up to be ready to talk about it. This is a big one.
Hmm.
We gotta get it right. Yeah, the young ladies of Avignon. So there you are. Um, this painting depicts five nude female prostitutes in a brothel on Avignon Street in Barcelona. It was unlike anything that had been done before. The women are rendered with fragmented angular forms and confrontational stares. Some have
Hmm.
mask like faces. Two figures on the right bear features inspired by tribal masks, African tribal
Hmm.
masks, while those on the left reflect the influence of ancient Iberian sculptures. Picasso had been studying African art. He'd visited the Ethnographic Museum at the Palais de Trocadero in Paris, and he later said those masks helped him liberate an utterly original artistic style of compelling, even savage force. Indeed, the
Hmm.
style is raw, aggressive, and geometric, with none of the softening of perspective or anatomy that Western painting traditionally demanded. And you can see this painting. You should know this painting. If you don't know the painting, it is still shocking to look at least to me.
Hmm.
And I would love to see this in person. I actually don't know where it is. Let me see. Actually, I think
Is
might be
it?
in
It's at the
it's in the
MoMA.
It's at the MoMA. Yeah, yeah. I've probably even passed by it, but I don't really know if I understood what I was looking at, which, it wouldn't be the first time. Um, Here's what they wrote about this. Let's see here. This is from the MoMA. Picasso's numerous inspirations ranged from history, politics, and current events to the work of fellow artists to the world outside of his studio. In his dynamic body of work, such opposites as intellect and emotions, forms of classicism and expressionism, and the conscious and the unconscious simultaneously clashed and coalesced. He was known for his fascination with so-called primitive art, a term typically referring to African masks and statuary, which for Picasso also encompassed ancient carvings from the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, the blocky pared down forms and forceful angular planes of primitive art ignited his imagination. And you can see how this kind of almost paves the way for Cubism, but also how confrontational
Mm.
this is, right? I mean, he turned the classic theme of the female nude into something aggressive with their mask-like faces. He was injecting this so-called primitive, which of course we would not use now, but primitive influences to challenge Western art norms. What does this even mean, right? People would ask him about Guernica, which we'll come to later, and he would say it's
Mm.
not the painter's job to define the symbols,
Right.
and but it was a bomb that he dropped on people, and
Mm.
the reaction was pretty wild. And I'm going to read a little bit from what Picasso had to say about this, and then we'll hear a little bit from his contemporaries who did not get it. Needless to say, let me see. Where is it? Yeah, I mean, they even have a thing. This is really about the masks. Here it is. Okay. Here's Picasso talking about it. I wanted to get this in because it's his voice, right? When I went to the Trocadero, it was revolting, like a flea market. The smell. I was all by myself. I wanted to get out. I didn't go. I stayed. I stayed. It came to me that this was very important. Something was happening to me, right? Those masks were not just pieces of sculpture like the rest. Not in the least. They were magic. And why weren't the Egyptians or the Chaldees? We hadn't understood what it was really about. We had seen primitive sculpture, not magic. And again, I'm reading from him, so we would definitely object to this kind of thinking now, certainly. But it's
Hmm.
very interesting to think about his attitude toward this. These Negroes were intercessors. That's a word I've known in French ever since then. Against everything, against unknown, threatening spirits. I kept on staring at these fetishes. Then it came to me. I too was against everything. I too felt that everything was unknown, hostile, everything. Not just this and that, but everything. Women, children, animals, smoking, playing, everything. I understood what their sculpture meant to the blacks, what it was really for. Why carve like that and not in any other way? After all, they were not cubists because cubism did not exist. All these fetishes were for the same thing. They were weapons to help people not to be ruled by spirits anymore, to be independent. Tools. If you give spirits a shape, you break free from them. Spirits in the subconscious. In those days, we weren't yet talking about the subconscious much. And emotion. They're all the same thing. I grasped why I was a painter. All alone in that museum, surrounded by masks, red Indian dolls, dummies covered with dust. The demoiselle must have come that day, not at all because of their forms, no, but because it was my first exercising picture. That's the point. All right. And that's why later on I also painted pictures like the ones I had painted earlier on, portraits, other portraits. So he comes to this real spiritual revelation with these things,
Hmm.
which is maybe, I don't know, maybe condescending, maybe romantic, but it certainly was real to him. And this combined with the business with his sister and God's his
Hmm.
promise to God that was not fulfilled, this begins to really explain almost, I think, his mania for art. Like I think he really believed he was saving souls and like saving his own soul and wrestling with the forces of the world by capturing these images and representing them again. Really intense. Yeah. Do you relate to that at all, Abby? Or is that just too intense or too I don't know.
I don't, yeah. I mean, it's a lot. Uh, I think I I think I would relate to it in that we do whatever our form of art is in an effort to make meaning of the things that we are learning and observing around us and seeing and want to communicate. The things that he's directly dealing with, probably not, but
Yeah. But
yeah.
you can see this, you could actually sense this force in his work.
Yeah.
So
I that
yeah,
confrontational is a really great word for how this painting feels.
absolutely. Yeah, and do you want to
Um,
just you just want to give your impressions really quickly and then I'll read some of the formal ideas about it?
uh, yeah, I mean, it it is confrontational. It's got that it, as a person who has been into a brothel one time, my sister actually used to be a madam in a brothel in Auckland. Did you not know this
Okay.
about me?
I think maybe I knew this, but I don't think you've ever announced it on a podcast that with listeners all around the world, Abby. Go on.
I will freely tell anyone this, and
Love it.
she would as well, I think. Yeah, so my sister used to be a madam in a brothel, and there was one time I went in there to deliver something to her, and when you go in, there's a reception, and then you go into the bar, and it's not like this where like all the women are naked or anything like that. They're clothed until you order one up and like go up to a room or whatever. But it is like there is almost
Like a
an
buffet, a
arrangement
buffet, a
of women
buffet. Yeah, a
and
buffet of ladies.
a buffet and whoever comes into the room they are going to get turned to sort of like we are here to show you our wares. And yeah, these women were not naked as the women are depicted in this painting, but it is that sort of I get the feeling that going into a brothel like this one at that time would be confrontational to the person that is visiting the man, whoever that may be. But it's I I mean, aside from the masks being an inspiration, um, if you're a quote genius artist like Picasso is, they've got to have some kind of meaning as well as just like, oh, there's these masks that I saw and I want to incorporate that in some kind of way. So I wonder if the choice of mask or the depiction of mask is to communicate how he felt that that particular woman's like spirit or aura or
Sure.
personality came through, but also I mean, so in Maori, we also have carvings that are abstract depictions of ancestors or real people or gods that are not the same as the African masks, but a similar sort of like interpretation of the human physical form. Um, and it's uh like a lot of the time it'll be a chief or someone with a lot of mana or a lot of strength and and people that are like the haka like it's like a war dance like people that are like on the forefront like challenging you and I wonder if there is an element of challenge with these masks
Absolutely.
on these prostitutes as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. That's very great. I appreciate your interpretation, Abby, and your very fascinating share about your personal history and the brothel in Auckland, which are they? Is this legal in?
They're at the time, I don't know what the law is now, but at the time they were decriminalized. So officially they were massage parlors that
Okay. Yeah,
there were
sure.
extra services if you were to pay a tip.
I see. Yeah, just the tip. All right. Ooh, doggy. In this painting, he avoided Renaissance rules of perspective and foreshortening. That's gone. The picture plane is shattered and flattened. There's no single viewpoint. It's as if we see the figures from multiple angles at once. This was shocking in 1907. As one analysis puts it, Picasso drew from tribal primitivism and also from the legacy of Cézanne, who had died in 1906, in flattening forms, but he went far beyond, shattering form and space in a way that laid the groundwork for Cubism and 20th century abstract art. Here we go. John Richardson, the art historian, said that La Demoiselle effectively made Picasso the most pivotal artist in Western painting since Giotto. And I think Giotto might have been the one who discovered paint perspective,
Hmm.
something like that. I mean, that was the idea, is that like we are, yeah, he was pioneering the use of perspective, Giotto. So he's saying this is the most influential Western artist since the 14th century. Fun. Yeah, no big deal. And this opened the door to Cubism and Georges Braque, who we're going to meet here momentarily. There was shock and outrage. He knew he had something revolutionary, but the initial
Hmm.
reaction, even among his friends, with friends like these, was disbelief and anger. They don't get it. They don't understand my epic Spanish genius. They don't understand my very horny genius. That was one thing that I started getting into with because I just sort of thought him as an extremely horny man. That helped a lot.
Yeah.
When he first showed the work in his studio, almost everyone was horrified. Matisse, his friendly rival, reportedly hated it, calling it a bad joke or worse. Matisse had been the avant-garde leader with his bright Fauvist colors, and suddenly Picasso trumped him with something so jarring that Matisse felt mocked. Here's a little bit about their rivalry, and you can. This is actually on the Wikipedia article about the ladies, the painting. So yeah, so Matisse was like the leading figure, okay? And his notoriety and preeminence as the leader of the new movement in modern painting continued to build through '06 and '07, and Matisse attracted a following, including Braque and other fellows. Um, And from October 1906, when he began, this is about Pablo, began preparatory work for La Demoiselle until its completion in March 1907, Picasso was vying with Matisse to be perceived as the leader of modern painting. Upon its completion, the shock and the impact of the painting propelled Picasso into the center of controversy and all but knocked Matisse and this style Fauvism off the map, virtually ending the movement by the following year. See, this is like they're like battling. There are
Mm.
these like conversations happening. Like, what matters? What's the next thing? We have to discover something original. It's the new century where we're getting street lamps and what does this all mean? Um, so yeah, in any case, it became a really big deal. And this is a 1992 essay called Reflections on Matisse by art critic Hilton Kramer. He wrote, after the impact of La Demoiselle d'Avignon, however, Matisse was never again mistaken for an avant-garde incendiary. With the bizarre painting that appalled and electrified the cognoscenti, which understood the La Demoiselle was at once a response to Matisse's La banlieue de vivre and an assault upon the tradition from which it derived. Picasso effectively appropriated the role of avant-garde wild beast, a role that, as far as public opinion was concerned, he was never to relinquish. And a little more here. Whereas Matisse had drawn upon a long tradition of European painting, he names a bunch of names through Cezanne and Gauguin,
Hmm.
Gauguin, to create a modern version of a pastoral paradise in La Banlieue de Vivre. You could go look at that. It's a very
Mm.
bright sort of painting of sort of lounging women, and so apparently the ladies is Pablo's response to this. Picasso had turned to an alien tradition of primitive art to create this painting, and in it, a netherworld of strange gods and violent emotions. As between the mythological nymphs of La Bonheur and the grotesque effigies of La Demoiselle, there was no question as to which was the more shocking or more intended to be shocking. Picasso had unleashed a vein of feeling that was to have immense consequence for the art and culture of the modern era, while Matisse's ambition came to seem, as he said in his Notes of a Painter, more limited. Limited, that is, to the realm of aesthetic pleasure. There was thus opened up in the very first decade of the century and in the work of its two greatest artists, the chasm that has continued to divide the art of the modern era down to our time. So they will sort of say that it's Matisse, it's Picasso, and you go one way, you go with the horny
Right.
Spaniard, or you go with the more subdued, Frenchman in
Well,
Matisse.
what's interesting, and I could see why they thought it might be a mockery, is it that it's got all the elements of like atypical like fine art sort of still life almost. You've got the fruit, you've got fabric that's like got folds in it because that was one of those things that's always hard to paint. And then you've got the nude, but they're not portrayed in a pretty way with the light falling, how it's supposed to fall. And so all those things that you're supposed to learn how to paint are in this painting, but he's just blown up the way that you paint them.
And you're talking about the Ladies of Avignon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating painting to spend a few minutes looking at, right? I mean, I'd love to go back and see it now. It is genuinely shocking even now. I mean, it looks like something that
Mm,
I mean, obviously it's well over 100 years old, but it does feel somehow contemporary and
mm.
relevant. And yeah, a lot there. I knew we would have to talk about it. So there you go. Another friend, Brock, at first said Picasso must be drinking petroleum and spitting fire to paint such a picture. Even Brock, who would soon collaborate with Picasso on Cubism, initially disliked it. One witness, the poet André Salmon, later wrote that people were asking whether this monstrosity was meant to hang on a wall or was some kind of cruel prank. He didn't exhibit this painting publicly until 1916, almost 9 years later.
Wow.
He's maybe sensed the world wasn't ready. But privately,
Mm.
for Picasso and a few daring others, the painting was the big bang of modern art. So there you go. And again, it's hard to overstate how important this painting is. And you have to, if you're looking it up and you go, "What? That's not that big of a deal." You have to imagine where they were at in 1907. They're
Mm.
not been anything like this, and they were still sort of clutching to the old rules. They knew they had to move on from sort of realism, and that had long been an issue. Photography was sort of taking over portraiture. Well, what are we going to do with portraiture? We're going to do something different. How do we represent these subjects? Well, let's try to show them from multiple angles so we can get the sense of it, and even disorient the viewer, and take some
Mm.
power away from the viewer, and maybe give some
Mm.
power to these poor horrors in the. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give them something to stare back at. Why are you looking at us? How dare you look
Mm.
at us? And so there's this weird kind of erotic, sexual, artistic tension going on. It's very sophisticated, well, almost looking kind of naive and childlike, right? It's a very
Mm.
intense painting, and we could talk about it for a long time, but we got to move on because we have more to do.
Tens of thousands of other works.
Oh my goodness. So in any event, we're on page 7 of this 27-page outline, and
Oh gosh.
I'm having a great time, Abby. I hope you're having a great time. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep rocking and rolling here. I'm really enjoying myself. Um, at some juncture again, Abby, I may ask you to sort of vamp and tell people what you're working on, what's coming next. But I'm in good shape. I'm gonna drink a little bit of water here. It's
Hmm.
always a bit of a marathon. Here on Art of Darkness. Lots of fun. This is one where I was so intimidated by this, and I just watched a lot of documentaries, and I had these books around, and I finally started to piece it together in my
Mm.
mind. And then, you start the outline, and then you start doing the episode. You go, okay, all right, we can do this. I've done these before, but also it's just like, man, this guy is just like so hard to wrap my head around. It's
Yeah.
not my wheelhouse, but it's really exciting and genuinely interesting to sort of learn about. Um, okay, so. Um, he's on his path toward cubism. All right. And I just want to say I'm not going to read from it because in the interest of time, but in the more favorable biography, there's a bit
Hmm.
about his generosity. He would help a friend in need. Once he started to have money, he would help other artists. I mean, we don't want to paint this sort of totally wicked, picture painting of Pablo. So that's in there, and you can find that biography if you want to be wooed by the memory of this man, this great artist. Um, so they go and they invent cubism. Abby, do you have any idea what the 3 stages of cubism are?
I have no idea actually.
Okay, early, analytical, and synthetic. Okay, and
Oh.
this gets like if you want to get into like art nerd territory, art historian nerdy, art hardcore art nerd territory. This is where you do it. I find cubism totally baffling and vaguely uninteresting, and I don't understand it. But I am willing to accept too that may be a me problem.
Hmm.
And there's no accounting for taste. So with Georges Braque, he founds this movement, and just briefly about Braque. Uh, is a major 20th century painter, collagist, draftsman, printmaker, and sculptor. His most notable contributions were in his alliance with Fauvism, and I keep coming across that. Fauvism is a style of painting and an art movement that emerged in France at the beginning of the 20th century. It was a style of La Fave, the Wild Beasts, a group of modern artists whose work emphasized painterly qualities and strong color. Okay, fine.
Hmm.
Sort of lost to history here now, but. Um, and then, of course, he's famous for Cubism, and he worked with Picasso from 1908 to 1912, and they just bounced ideas back and forth off each other and competed with one another and tried to break open this new idea of Cubism. And so I have from the Patrick O'Brien biography, I've got something about. Let's see here. All right, here we go. Uh, uh, Well, this talks about the various phases and changing analytic to synthetic. So maybe I'll get to that when we start to cover the different meanings of these things. Um, and let's see. Yeah, they would go around, they would travel together. And there's a fun story about where like a situation where they were very competitive about this,
Hmm.
right? Where Brock saw something in a store in one of these seaside towns they were at. It was like lettering on some, I don't know, some sort of like folk art or something, and he thought, "Oh, I could use that." But instead, he got it and he hid it from Picasso. He didn't want Picasso to see this idea because he had to get the thing moved a little bit further, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I love it. It's Lennon McCartney, right? Who can write the better, who can write the next hit? Who can write the next number one single? Who can write the next
Right.
banger? right? Just like us, Abby. Who's going to do the next great Art of Darkness episode, right? It, you
Oh,
know, it's it.
I didn't see it as a competition.
Oh, you didn't get the memo, Abby. You didn't get the
No.
memo. No, of course I'm mostly joking, but these guys really went after it like that. So, okay.
Mhm.
Let's get into these sections. Okay. So, from 1908 to the outbreak of World War I in 1914, Picasso and Braque worked so closely that their paintings at times were nearly indistinguishable. They were like
Hmm.
mountain climbers roped together, Braque later said. So, we'll look at the stages. All right. Proto-Cubism, early Cubism, 1908 to 1909. Immediately after Demoiselle, Picasso continued experimenting with fractured forms. Both he and Braque were profoundly influenced by the late works of Paul Cézanne. There was a retrospective for Cézanne in 1907 in Paris, and his dictum to treat nature by the cylinder, the sphere, the cone. And they felt
Hmm.
encouraged to break objects into their basic shapes. Uh, Picasso's 1908 painting of nude figures and Braque's, it might be, I think they may be talking about the Demoiselle 1907, and Braque's cubistic landscapes of the same year show this emerging style. Okay, I take it back. They're moving forward. They simplified
Hmm.
and geometrized forms. We could think of Picasso's Three Women with its blocky, interlocking shapes. This African influenced period, as art historians call 1907 and to '09, still has some color and texture, but it led directly to the more austere phase called analytic cubism. Abby, do you want to look at Pablo Picasso, Three Women? And you can go to Smart History, Three Women. Can you find that?
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that would be great if you could kind of jump in, look at the painting, and then maybe do a little bit of reading from this to give me just a little tiny break so I can go and clear my throat. Yeah, I got like a little nose thing, but I am battling. I'm fighting through. Here you go, Abby. It's you could just
oh,
look up.
wow.
Yeah, you find it. Okay, there you go. Take it
Yeah.
away. I will be back.
Pablo Picasso's Three Women shows both a simplification of the human body to basic geometric forms and a novel approach to representing the figure in space. Rather than depicting the figures as independent forms in an open spatial environment, Picasso's women form an interlocking whole, fitting together like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. The jutting hip of the central figure forms a common edge with the right hand figure's torso and breast, and the left hand figure's shoulder, arm, and head help to define the central figure's right side. The figure on the right merges with the surrounding form, which is probably a curtain. On the left and at the top of the painting, there is a greater distinction between the orange and red tones of the figures and the blues and greens of the background. But here too, the relation of the figure's physical forms to the surrounding space is ambiguous. The geometrically ske schematized blue drapery covering part of the left-hand figure echoes the color of the background, and both are divided into a pattern of diamonds and triangles. The effect of these repeated patterns and ambiguities is a painting that shifts oddly from conveying a strong sense of solid volumes in space, and a reminder that the painting is literally a flat surface colored in a pattern of painted geometric shapes. And it is very colorful. Currently at the St. Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, these women are all sort of huddled together in what looks like a sleeping position. But yeah, definitely all geometric forms. It's like a deconstructed version of the human body. Um, yeah, it's strange. You can for sure see the African mask influence. The faces have got these like sunken cheeks where, you know, cheeks would normally protrude. And it's a lot more colorful than the Les Demoiselles, which actually they have another picture of below here and is in a completely different color scheme to the one that I just saw.
Oh yeah, you have to be
I
careful
think
with
he
this
might have
stuff.
reworked it.
I think you have to be careful online because
Yeah.
they're the reaper. You got to go and see these paintings in person if you can. But this, yeah, this painting is it's just it's so fascinating. It's like there's no solid perspective. You don't know, and it almost feels like it's dancing. If you look at Three
Mm.
Women, I mean, it's like a
It's a
dance. You know,
it's a lot more calm than the the demoiselles.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Abby, thank you for covering. Good stuff. So yeah, we're really into cubism now, and this would move into this phase of analytic cubism, which sounds really, really, really boring.
It does sound really boring.
Doesn't it? I mean, and you talk to like art people or you listen to these art people, they
They're like,
can't
oh my
believe
God,
it.
analytic cubism.
I love analytic cubism, and it's just okay. All right, my philistinism comes through here, but I can get into it. Okay, so here we go. Uh, Picasso and Braque hit their stride in these years between 1910 and 1912, producing paintings that truly broke objects and figures into flickering shards of monochromatic neutral tones. They would analyze a subject, say a violin, a human face, a bottle, by painting it from multiple angles at once, as if the object had been shattered and reassembled on the
Hmm.
canvas. So that's where the analytic comes from, right? A typical analytic cubist painting, Picasso's Ma Jolie or Braque's The Portuguese, is made up of overlapping planes in browns and grays. It's challenging to look at, nearly abstract. But usually, if you look long enough, you discern the subject. As one description notes, Picasso and Braque took apart objects and analyzed them in terms of their shapes. The style was so novel that it confused many viewers and still does. But Picasso and Braque were proud of their partnership. They had developed a private visual language. They even shared each other's motifs and techniques to the point that, famously, when the art dealer Daniel Henri Conweller brought some of their Cubist works to the poet Apollinaire, Apollinaire had trouble telling which were Picasso's and which were Braque's. Both painters often left clues like stenciled letters or recognizable fragments like the curve of a guitar. Okay. So you can find a painting here at the MoMA. I'm looking at this now, and it's called Ma Jolie. And I'll read a little bit about this. In this composition, Picasso takes apart a traditional subject, a woman holding a guitar. He composed the figure into different planes, angles, lines, and shadings, completely abstracting the face. Six strings in the center of the picture allude to the guitar, while the triangle on the right appears to be a woman's elbow. Ma jolie, my pretty one, inscribed in the bottom of the painting is also the nickname of Picasso's girlfriend. So, a woman we haven't met yet, but Marcel Humbert, and the refrain from a popular French cabaret song. So, very clever. And you look at this, and it's just like, what? Where? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
If you
what?
hadn't described what it was supposed to be, I would have no idea.
Do you care to
There
describe
else?
it?
It's it's some very muted tones, blacks, yellows, little like gray. It it looks like like a pencil drawing. Um and yeah, there's some forms that look like a guitar sort of around near the bottom, but there's a lot of geometric patterns with some shading and then some more sort of either drawn over the top of them or underneath them.
Yeah, I mean, it
And they're all
has
sort of they feel like they're all stacked. Like it's
right. Like Jenga, like a toppled Jenga thing, right? Yeah.
yeah, but it also looks like it reminds me a little bit of the Salvador Dali like you know when the with the stairs that are going down to some other stairs and the stairs is
Oh,
that
no,
Dali?
I think that's Escher. I think you're thinking of the
Oh right,
Escher.
yeah,
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 I'm
yeah.
thinking of Escher, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're right, and it has like there's a quality of it that is like sort of maybe jazz-like and feels
Yeah,
improvisational. I mean, I wonder
it
how
feels
well,
jazz like.
yeah, and I wonder how like plotted it was. It's definitely really hard to imagine hanging this in your living room as decor. Like I respect it for that. I mean, if
Yeah.
anybody wants to find a Picasso for me to hang in my living room as decor, I would not say no. But yeah, it's just very
I
interesting.
was
And then these, yeah.
struggling to find any kind of human form in there. Oh, there's a little bit that could be a geometric representation of a hand
Sure.
towards the bottom right corner.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
Yeah.
there's
I
some
mean,
musical notes in there.
yeah, and some letters, and I feel like that lettering might
Yeah.
have been the thing that they had found in the South and everything. And there you go. And art people like they lose their minds over this. It's one of those things where it's just like I still don't quite get it. I bet. I bet if I spent more time really studying the period, studying what they were doing,
Hmm.
and also like looking at them in person, it might really start to strike me. In any case, Cubism, yay! Gertrude Stein said this. Yeah. That'll be the musical about Picasso, and Braque. Cubism, the musical. Um, well, no, so here. While Stein didn't shape the style as an artist, she was Picasso's confidant. She continued to champion his Cubist works, buying pieces when others scoffed, and provided moral support. In fact, Picasso kept Stein apprised of his experiments. In 1912, during Cubism's evolution, Picasso wrote to Stein saying, "We need a new name to designate them, these works." So how did it become called Cubism, right?
Hmm.
Not long after, others would coin the term cubism. They didn't come up with it themselves, and it was derived from a critic's dismissive comment that Braque's paintings looked like little cubes. So, there you go. It looks like little cubes. Stein also recorded observations of Picasso's life. Her memoir mentions casual details like Picasso bringing around a young girl named Eva to Stein's home. And we'll talk a little more about some of these other women soon. We get to the third phase of Cubism. I know you're excited for more Cubism, Abby, and I can't get enough. Around 1912, it took a turn. Picasso and Braque
Oh.
maybe feeling they'd deconstructed reality enough. Okay,
Hmm.
enough. Right? We're going to reintegrate color, texture, and playfulness into their work. And this phase is marked by the invention of collage. Picasso started pasting real world materials onto his artworks: wallpaper, newspaper clippings, sheet music. A famous example is Picasso's still life with chair caning, where he glued oilcloth printed with a chair cane pattern onto the canvas and framed it with actual rope. This is often cited as the first collage in fine art. Okay, there's another first, as well as the first step toward assemblage, three-dimensional collage. Picasso also made 3D constructions in the period, the most celebrated being his sculpture of a guitar. In 1912, he assembled a guitar from cardboard, and in 1914, he crafted one from sheet metal. This was a radical departure from traditional sculpture, which was carved or cast. Picasso basically invented the modern concept of sculptural assemblage,
Mm.
right? Okay, so here's another thing he invented. And you can look up, we're on it's pablopicasso.org, the official source. And you could just look up guitar, okay? That's what it's called, guitar. And guess what? It looks like a guitar. I could see a guitar. So, reading here, this is 1914. To create
Oh
guitar,
yeah.
Picasso, it's a guitar, right, Abby?
Uh-huh.
He made a radical leap from the sculptural tradition of modeling, carving or molding, to a new technique of assemblage. He created a first version of a guitar from cardboard in 1912, then later remade the work in sheet metal. The modern ordinariness of both of these materials is very different from traditional sculptural materials such as bronze, wood, and marble. The planes of the sheet metal construction engage in a play of substance and void in which volume is suggested but not depicted. In a dramatic demonstration of the flexible way visual forms can be read in context, the guitar's sound hole, which normally recedes from the instrument's smooth surface, here projects outward into space. Early visitors to his studio were bewildered by this work. What is that? They asked. Does that rest on a pedestal? Does that hang on a wall? Is it a painting or a sculpture? Apparently, Picasso responded, "It's nothing. It's la guitar." Fun. So, I mean, he basically said, "It's painting. It's a sculpture. It's a guitar. It's my art. It's the thing I made." There you go. Enjoy. So fun. Felt like another thing to sort of get in here. And the sheet metal version is now at the MoMA. Um, Early viewers were perplexed. They said, "Is this art?" But soon the idea of using found materials would be foundational for modern sculpture, and we don't have to think about Duchamp and the toilet and the other
Right.
all the other assemblage to follow. Right? Okay, good, fun. Um, so he sort of liberated art from the tyranny of painting versus sculpture, right? We can kind of do both. And in this analytic or this final stage of cubism, synthetic cubist paintings, they were often brighter, simpler shapes. You can sort of recognize things. And they would introduce recognizable signs or symbols. For instance, Picasso or Braque might include a painted fake wood grain or sand for texture, or paste a real wine label onto a bottle they painted. Um, So it starts to be more playful and less
Hmm.
sort of confusing. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during these Cubist years, his personal and professional life was deeply intertwined with Brock and other creative friends. Apollinaire, the poet, Kahnweiler, the dealer, and others formed his circle in Montparnasse. A notorious episode. And then this happened in 1911, which we're going to cover this on the After Dark for Patreon and Substack, patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. The Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre in 1911. Okay, and I think, and we'll talk more about this, after the main episode. I think if you wanted
Mhm.
to do a not hacky biopic about Picasso, this is where you start. He's
Right.
in the thick of cubism. I forget which woman he's with. He might be with multiple women. It's easy to get confused and distracted. And the Mona Lisa is stolen, and the suspicion fell on the avant-garde circles. The poet friend
Hmm.
Apollinaire was arrested, and he foolishly implicated Picasso.
Oh, wow.
So that's a little tease for the After Dark for patrons. So if you want that, please support the pod. Hopefully, you think it's worth it.